The voters thought that our economic mess was created by George Bush, by and large. I mean, more voters think that than think that it was Obama's fault. So the voters, to some extent, were cutting him some slack and saying it was really bad when he took office. It's better now than it was. It's not where we'd like it to be, but it's better, looks like it's improving. And so, you know, maybe we can give him the benefit of the doubt. The Obama campaign did a good job of targeting some groups, fairly large segments of the electorate, and did very well with them. That would be young people, for example. In 2008, their turnout was really high, but they were 18% of the electorate. It looks like on election day this year, they were 19% of the electorate, and they went overwhelmingly for the president. Of course, women is another group where the president did very well. Not quite as well as he had done in 2008, but he still did, you know, he had a double-digit lead over Romney among women. And then, of course, Latinos. It's a rapidly growing segment of the population, but one which went, again, overwhelmingly for the president, in fact, at historic levels. So whereas President Bush was able to get around 40% of the Latino vote, Mitt Romney got only 29%. And then thirdly, I'd say the campaign itself. Now, political scientists sometimes discount campaigns because they can't make a sure loser into a winner. But in a really close race, like we assumed this would be, having a better campaign is a real bonus, and I think the president's campaign was much better than Mitt Romney's, both strategically and tactically. And so in terms of tactics, they just knew exactly where their voters were, and they knew exactly how to get them to the polls. In many ways, this was a status quo election. Even after all the billions of dollars spent, we ended up back where we started in some ways, a Republican-controlled House and a Democratic-controlled Senate and White House. And so you might think that that's going to lead to more of the same that we experienced the last 2 years, more gridlock, more really intense partisan fighting. And that may be true. You certainly will still have some partisan battles. But I'm a little more optimistic, and I think that there's probably some reason to think that they'll work together. The Republicans in Congress and the White House will work together. One of the reasons for that is the president is term limited, so he can't run for re-election. And part of the Republican strategy over the last 2 years was to try to not hand him really significant legislative victories because that would help him in his re-election. Well, that's not an issue any longer, and so I'm not sure that they'll have the same strategy. Secondly, the health care bill, the Affordable Care Act, or Obamacare, as an issue, I think, is taken off the table. The Supreme Court has already spoken on that issue, and the election results also suggest that probably nothing's going to happen in terms of repealing it. It'll go into full effect in 2014, and there's not much to argue about any longer. That was a real point of contention for the last 2 years, which I think, as I said, is just kind of off the table now. And then thirdly, I think they have to act. There are some things that they have to do. Everybody knows about the fiscal cliff. Something has to be done on those things. That includes whether or not to renew the Bush tax cuts, because if those expire, they tend to skew toward the wealthy, but everybody got a tax cut under the Bush tax cuts. If those expire, that's a lot less money in people's pockets, which they can't spend in the economy and will be harmful to the economy. And one other thing I'd say about what's next, and that I think will be interesting to watch, is that the Republican Party is going to have to really reconsider not only its image, but really even some of its issue positions. So immigration obviously comes to mind. It will be hard for them to take a really hard line on immigration like they have in the last couple of years and be successful in national politics because of the growing Latino population. But they also have to think about their position on women's issues. And so it's both a substantive consideration. Do they shift some of their positions at least slightly? But it's also a kind of symbolic and image question. And can they really be successful if they have the hard edges that they seem to have had during this election season? And the answer is probably no. So parties always go through this when they lose elections, a couple of elections in a row. But they're really going to have to consider how are they going to position themselves moving forward. Otherwise, they'll find themselves potentially as a minority party for years to come.